Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our December AG meeting. We are looking forward to meeting with you today and sharing some information and getting some feedback from you all as well. We're all at USBE. We all are wearing our festive holiday sweaters in honor of our good friend Kim. So that leads us to our quote this month. And I decided I'm done with crying. We'll see. I can't promise anything, but I wanted this to be a happy day. And we're all wearing our holiday sweaters in honor of Kim, something that she loved and really appreciated. We were able to celebrate Kim's life this past weekend with her family and friends. And I was so impressed that there were several previous students of Kim's that attended her celebration of life and spoke about the impact that she had on their lives. And as I was looking at quotes to share for this month, I was looking actually back through Kim's Facebook and looking at quotes, and she had so many quotes. Kim was always a champion of teachers and loved being a teacher. It was a huge part of her life. A ton of quotes that she had posted on Facebook were revolved around teachers and the impact that teachers had on people's lives. So I wanted to share a quote that Kim had actually posted on her Facebook that's from a teacher, Brittany Cohen. She said, "Every single time I see a student, I'm proud of them as if they are my own. There is something amazing about being part of this incredible community." And just echoing that I am so appreciative of the relationships and the friendships that we have both with our staff here at USBE and with our partnerships and connections with you all as the assessment directors. So thank you for joining us today. And I cannot believe I got through that without crying. So you guys, I'm going to give myself a don't worry. I didn't. Oh, no, don't. No, I'm an empathetic crier too, so don't make me do that. But we'll jump into talking about APAC, and that will help me get my emotions in check. So our Assessment and Accountability Policy Advisory Committee, APAC, the purpose of APAC is really to review any of our policies around business rules, administration, accountability, and any implementation decisions around our state mandated assessments and accountability. The role is to assist our USBE A&A section to represent and inform the education community about any of the board's policies, so to help us make those policies and then also help us to communicate them, any policies, rules, programs, or procedures to the field. So that's really the purpose of our APAC committee. We're actually looking, if we can look at the next slide, is we're looking for a couple of people still. So we actually have 2 vacancies on our APAC committee. We have representation from a couple of people in the group already, but if you know of anyone that's an educator or an elementary principal that would be interested in participating in our APAC committee, the application was emailed with the slide information today. On the application, the date on the application says December 13th. We actually have not had anyone apply yet. So Darren asked that we extend that window and communicate that with you. So he's extended that window out until January 6th. If you know, I know that's right in the middle of everybody's break, but if you know of anyone, an educator or an elementary principal that would be interested in participating on our APAC committee, the term is a 4-year term and we meet 3 to 4 times a year for approximately half a day, so 3 to 4 hours. So if you know of anyone that would be interested in participating, that's interested in policy, particularly around accountability or assessment, we would love to have their nomination or those people join us. If you have questions about the committee, you can reach out to myself or Darren Nilsson. We'd be happy to talk through any questions. And then if you know of people that would be interested in participating, that application was attached with the email this morning. And then a question for the group. We have upcoming APAC meetings in January. We have additional meetings throughout the year as well, but wanted to follow up with you all on recommendations for topics. Around accountability, in January, we're going to be talking a lot about our ESSA plan and EL accountability. But if you have ideas about other policies or business rules that you would like to discuss, or as far as test administration or implementation that you would like our policy advisory committee to discuss, either come off of chat if that's possible. I think people can come off of chat. Possibly not. Possibly just put them in written in the chat. people just a second of wait time. But then also, if you think of anything over the next couple of weeks as you're jumping into Assessment World Works and have questions or something that you think would be good to discuss at a policy advisory committee, please reach out to us. We're happy to get that on our agendas. I think that's the end of my section. Oh, no, excuse me, there's one more. Just as an FYI, at our December board meeting, we took Board Rule R277404 to the committee and asked them to remove the English portion of that UA Plus assessment because that's part of our plans moving forward. We also recommended a change to Rule 726 about SOEP and rostering. After that discussion, we had a lot of internal discussion and talked a lot about actually keeping that rule as is. So we're actually going to table. We recommended moving forward with a change to that rule, and after discussion with some of you all and with others, we determined that that rule was not necessary to change, and so we're tabling that rule being changed. Another FYI, we sent out information in the AD memo, but wanted to highlight it here as well so you're aware. R277419 was adjusted with kindergarten. There was a lot of feedback about previously when we had the 12 days for educational services for kindergarten, and then that was removed with the changes to the kindergarten assessment requirements. There was a lot of feedback that people were interested in having those days put back in place. So after discussion at the board rule, there was recommendation that those additional 5 educational service days are optional for kindergarten. That rule went back into place. If you have questions on that rule, you can contact Christina Elegante and she can help you work through any questions on that one. And then just for your information, we have 2 procurements in the works. We're looking at a sole source procurement for our ELP assessment and continuing to work with WIDA on that as a sole source. And then we're also pursuing, we have an additional 5 years on our contract with DLM, and we're pursuing that contract amendment moving forward with an additional 5 years. So those are coming up for procurement. I think that was the end of my sections. Any questions on those things, please reach out or type them in the chat. We're happy to respond.
There was one comment in the chat. I think it was related to your APAC topics.
Okay. Remote testing administration would be a great topic to review now that it's been done, and identifying things that could be improved. Yeah, that's actually, thank you, Delray, for bringing that up. I know it's something that we have talked about with other states and talked about recommendations for security and processes, things that we would recommend our vendors updating in their system. But I think you bring up a great point that we would love to get feedback from those who have administered through remote proctoring and see if there's things that we can improve on that. So thanks for bringing that. We'll make sure to add that to our agenda.
All right, I guess it's my turn. All right, so I just have one quick slide about assessment rostering. We have finished uploading all of our pre-ID files. Pre-IDs for ACT are in. Our second WIDA pre-ID file has all been uploaded. So any changes to students' enrollments in ACT or WIDA are now up to you. You can do any manual changes you need. Just please, when you make any sort of new student enrollment, transfers or anything, please make sure that your student information that you add to WIDA or ACT now matches what is in your SIS. It just makes it so much easier when it comes to getting the results back to have that information match, especially if you are requesting accommodations in ACT. Always a good idea to make sure your accommodations request as student information matches what is in ACT now, just so those accommodations can be applied. In WIDA, if you could please make sure that the information on those test booklets matches what is in your SIS. That will make your life so much easier when it comes to later on when we do data validation, because that is the biggest source. Those booklets have student number instead of SSID. The names are a little bit different, and any sort of mismatch causes us to have to go in later during data validation and fix that. So it will save us, you, me, everybody, a lot of effort later in the springtime. And I think that's it. Obvious, regular old links here. core code list, student rostering manual, the private school rostering, they're all in the same place. These links take you there. And of course, if you have any questions, you can call me, give me an email. I'm here for you.
Marion,
Yes.
question.
Oh, yes. What is it? Sorry, I don't have the chat up.
Twill has had numerous active second grade students who are not rostered for the WIDA access. Is this a known issue?
No, that generally isn't, that issue usually pops up if a student is marked incorrectly in your SIS is not an English language learner. If you want to send me some SSIDs, I will happily check them out.
Says lots of Salt Lake too.
Second grade also or other grades?
I don't know. She just says lots of Salt Lake.
Send me an email with some SSIDs and I will take a look.
Selena said we also had second grades, and Tara Lynn said just second grade.
Well, send me some SSIDs and I will check it out. Everybody.
Second grade maybe had some problems.
That's interesting.
That is interesting.
Oh, yep, Jeremy has some missing too.
All right, I'm looking right now, but send me some SSIDs. No, you can't.
All right, so first I want to say a thank you for everyone's patience as I was out for a family emergency in not being able to get back to you because I know that we are very near our testing and things are starting to happen. So just thank you for your patience in me getting back to people, and also big thanks to Tracy for helping try to cover some of this.
We tried. I don't think I did a good job, friend. Sorry.
When it comes to the pre-ID uploads, we will look into that more. But again, for a couple of LEAs that have told us that things were missing in AMS, we did find that things were not marked correctly in certain SIS. And then we did have one LEA that reported that an entire grade disappeared, but then something bizarro happened on their end and they were able to troubleshoot it. So I don't know if this is a common occurrence, but Marina and I will definitely do some troubleshooting, and we'll talk to WIDA and DRC to see what we can do to help get to the crux of the problem. Again, back on our entry slide, my subtle reminders of our intro slide, my subtle reminders of please, as we are starting to get ready for testing, again, this is a costly mistake. Please make sure that you are bubbling things correctly, okay? Please read the directions. I know that we don't live in a world of Scantrons anymore, but WIDA in those younger grades do require bubbling. And if it's not actually bubbled, if you put a line, an X, a check mark, it will not be scored. And to request a rescore, I believe it is around $250 a test. Okay, that is pricey. So please, 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 again, just make sure all test administrators are getting that message. And if test administrators are doing the annual required test administration trainings through the WIDA Secure Portal, this is messaged in that training. So please, again, make sure those reminders are getting out to everyone. All right. Now, if students are testing online, there are no testing booklets, correct? Yep. So that's actually for grades 4 on up. No testing booklets. Or no testing booklets. So no bubbling. But anything younger, bubbling, the biggest offender is kindergarten. Okay. That tends to be our biggest offender, our kindergarten booklets. All right. Let's talk about kindergarten booklets. All right. On December 11th, you all received an email from DRC. It was also attached in this morning's email with the slides. It is a Word document, so please make sure that you are taking a look at this. There was an error in printing. unfortunately. So this is nothing that USBE can control. We are not in charge of printing. This is a DRC error. They are incredibly apologetic, and they understand that this is this is a big problem and setback. The page numbers in the kindergarten booklet start with page 5 instead of page 1. So this only affects kindergarten booklets, and it also affects the large print kindergarten booklets. I believe this year only one LEA needed to order a large print booklet. So if you are that LEA, the large print also was affected by this. But everyone who has kindergarten booklets, you are affected by this. DRC is reprinting all kindergarten materials for the entire consortium, okay? Yeah, this is a costly mistake. We are not footing that bill. The corrected materials are going to be shipped out, and I just got confirmation yesterday of that date for Utah. Thank goodness WIDA and DRC have kind of prioritized Utah. They know that Megan's been having a hard time, so they took pity on me, and they were like, we're going to prioritize Utah and getting the materials out as soon as possible and getting all communications out to your teachers and test administrators and LEAs and everyone. So we are asking that you please do not use the incorrect materials that you received this week, okay? Which I know we're like, yay, we all got our materials early and we can get things ready before the break and come back and things are done. Kindergarten, no. So I'm really, really sorry. But everything else, yes. They are going to be sending out a follow-up email this afternoon with more information regarding this. Your materials, because they are in the process of printing them right now for Utah, they will arrive beginning Monday, January 6th, and I have that on the next slide as well. So the new kindergarten materials will be scheduled to arrive Monday, January 6th, and then they will continue to arrive the 7th and the 8th. So that week that we begin testing, okay? So again, please keep an eye out for the kindergarten materials. Again, they tried to prioritize Utah because they know our test window is beginning. For those kindergarten ones. The materials that are incorrect, you do not need to send back right away, but you do need to send them back with your shipments. So you can choose when you want to send them back. You can send them back with everything all at once at the end of testing, or you can send them back now. One thing that I do want to note that I bolded on that previous slide is, thank you. If for some reason this message does not reach the masses, which I'm going to ask very kindly, I'm actually going to beg and plead that you make sure this message gets out to all your test administrators and everyone that handles the materials. If an incorrect kindergarten booklet is used, it will still be processed and scored, okay? So again, if by accident an incorrect one is used, you can still return it and it will still be processed and scored. But I just really ask that you be careful that they are not, because we don't want people saying the wrong things per the wrong pages, okay? Because it's not going to align with the test administration manual. All right. So kindergarten materials. All right, I'm gonna answer your question in just a moment, okay? All right, so WIDA access, the first pre-ID file was submitted. Please remember that the first pre-ID file submitted on October 30th, that is the one that determines your materials, okay? So LEAs were responsible for ordering any large print, alternate, or Braille access, okay? And then the state orders everything else for you. That includes the kindergarten materials that were wrong and will be replaced. And that was what everything was based on, okay? If you've had new students, enter since then. And we might have uploaded them in that second pre-ID file that was submitted on the 11th of this month. You still need to order extra materials for those students, okay? So anyone that has been identified or came to your LEA that is an EL, you would need to order materials for them if they are K through 3. Okay, well, actually just K, I guess, or through 3. Actually, yeah, K through 3, because 3 still does the writing booklets. So first, second, third writing booklets. So you might need to order materials for them, or if you need more alternate or Braille or large print. Okay, so you may need to order some. And yes, you do need to wait till the additional materials ordering window opens. They normally get that stuff out to you very, very quickly. Okay. And remember that our test window, it is 2 months long. So you'll get your materials in time, okay? Again, if you have any students, like Maureen said, that came after the 11th, then you will probably need to manually upload that. And one thing I just really want to stress is, Maureen said you need to put in their student ID numbers. That is the state student ID. We have a lot of LEAs accidentally put in school or LEA IDs. It must be the state ID. All right. So here are those dates, okay? The test registrations are open, so you can start setting up tests. Remember, registrations is now the new name for test sessions, putting students into test sessions. And our test window does start when we come back from the holiday break on Tuesday the 7th. You should be able to start ordering additional materials now, as of last Friday. If you do not have that capability, please send me an email and I can check your permissions to make sure you have the correct permissions in AMS to do that. And again, I've highlighted when the new kindergarten materials will be shipped, so you can expect them through the 6th through the 8th. And just remember that UPS, if no one's there to sign for them, they'll try for 3 days in a row, and then it'll be sent back. And again, so for your 6th grade student, you don't need to order any materials unless they have to take paper access for some reason, but anything for 4th grade on up, it's all online, so you shouldn't need to order any materials if you get new students. And then will they send the additional missing 2nd grade materials, or do we need to order them? Savannah, can you confirm that you didn't get any 2nd grade materials? Take a look in the chat and we'll see if there's okay, you got some, but not enough. Okay, I do have a call this afternoon with DRC, so I'll bring this up and I'll have Maureen join us on that call this afternoon so we can start to troubleshoot. Hopefully we can have answers and we can send out Sid, if it's okay, updates as soon as we have them. So we were not aware of this 2nd grade issue at all. So thank you for telling us. All right.
There are like 4,500 2nd graders in WIDA right now. I'm trying to figure out the connection between the ones that are missing. I don't know what it is. So it's not like every 2nd grader is missing. It's not entire LEAs full of 2nd graders that are missing that I'm aware of. It just seems to be sporadic. Yes.
Okay. We're going to trouble it and troubleshoot it, and we're going to get to the bottom of it all. I'm not sure why things got so wonky this year, but it feels like something's happening. We're not sure. Materials, I mean, we had one win, y'all. We got our materials early. I'm going to take that one. But, thank you for your patience. And Carolyn. So some students are duplicated. That's normally not something that we see happen, but we can have WIDA merge duplicate files. And just remember though, you cannot remove any students from AMS. We as the state do that after all testing is done. So you at the LEA level cannot remove any students. The only thing that we can do during testing is transfer students if they need to be transferred within an LEA to a new school or to another LEA within Utah. We approve all those transfers, and then also if we need to merge any student files within AMS as well. So again, please stay tuned. I apologize that there is so much craziness. This was totally unexpected. But we will send out another message, hopefully this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you. Next. All right, here are just some upcoming webinars related to Access. So if you just need any extra overview and help on certain processes through testing, and of course, remember all webinars are recorded and posted in the WIDA Secure portal, so you can go back and watch them if you happen to miss them. But here are links and information of when and what they will be covering for upcoming free Access webinars. And then, let's see, what else do I have? Other training opportunities through WIDA that we'll be hosting that are Utah specific. These ones aren't going to be happening again till later this year, upcoming year, so in March and then in the summer. Those are still open for registration in Midas. And passing this on for John Hughes, the Executive Director of the Southeast Education Service Center. There's a new upcoming ESL endorsement program. On this slide, there is a website and a flyer. The flyer, if you open it, obviously digitally, there are clickable links for registration and everything on there if you have anyone interested in getting their ESL endorsement through Southern Utah University. So John is trying to get the message out and fill up this new cohort for ESL endorsements. If you have questions, please contact John. And then finally, our contact information. I will always say this, try to email us first. When you call, quite often we are stuck in meetings and it's hard for us to get to the phone. So emailing us, it's easier for us to sneak peek at our email during meetings. So please always follow up with an email. And then every now and then when we do get calls, people don't leave phone numbers. And so it's really hard to call back if we don't have your number to actually call back. And there are a lot of LEA websites where your numbers are not easy to find. So please just remember that, yes, a lot of times there's caller ID, but most of us have our phones, since we don't always work in the office, most of us have phones forwarded. So we see the forwarding number, not the actual caller ID. So please, if you do really, really want to call, leave your number. That really, really helps. So again, I would always pursue email first and foremost. And then of course, please get on our websites. Normally most questions can be answered through our websites. We have our USPE hosted WIDA website, and then we have WIDA's Utah hosted website. Both of those are going to have a plethora of information. So just take a look there as well if we're not able to get to the phone or you need something answered immediately and we can't get to our email for a couple hours. And again, my reminder of bubble, please bubble, and stay tuned for more information. We'll be working it out and doing the best we can to get everything figured out with DRA this afternoon for you all. I think that's it. And that was a lot. So thank you.
Okay, this is Jared Wright, and I am going to be sharing some information about Acadians. So yeah, there we go. So the first one, these are more reflective questions for you to think about. We have received some questions and noticed that there have been test administration and also data entry outside of the specified windows. So just think about what are your testing windows, what are your data entry windows for Acadians reading, Acadians math, and then have those windows been shared with those in your LEA. And it's probably similar to what we experience here at the state. We've shared them. I'm sure you've shared them. You may need to reshare them to remind people about those. So this is just more reflective to consider maybe sharing again what those windows are. We do have data analysis trainings specifically focused on MOY, and you can see at the bottom of the slide the things we'll focus on. And that each of these trainings you see on the left, those dates and times for the training that's focused around school leaders and what they might want to look for, and then the teacher-focused dates and times as well. So feel free to share and attend those as you would like. And this is specific to Acadians Math, but I have a document linked here. And the reason I've done this document is try and clarify, and hopefully it doesn't create more questions. But for Acadians Math, we've had some trainings, the Essentials Workshop that oftentimes is really thorough, but the people who are administering the tests don't need it to be that thorough. It goes into logistics, it goes into the background of the test, and they just want to know, how do I give this test? What do I do? So I've tried to clarify and also create some options within there for, you can see the two different things that I was thinking about. One is just, I just need to give the test. That's all. So train me on how to do that. And then the other is, okay, I want to go through the official trainings and I want to become an Acadians Math mentor. So what does that route look like? So if you have questions, feel free to email me. But that document is available and will be updated as needed. All right, and then this is some information about invalidations that we're updating. So Teresa and I have received questions and requests related to teachers accidentally giving the benchmark when they're wanting to progress monitor a student. And then since they've given those benchmarks in the past, we said that benchmark now counts. However, based on our discussions with people who have called in, we've looked at some of the details, and so we've made a few changes to that. And so you can see in that first paragraph, specifically around tests that have student materials. If those tests have the student materials, but the teacher doesn't have the correct materials because they were expecting to do progress monitoring and they accidentally did the benchmark, then you can invalidate the measure and then make sure it's given accurately. And this is kind of going back to that first slide I shared as far as reflective questions. Please make sure your staff and those administering tests are paying attention to what test am I giving? Is it the benchmark? Is it progress monitoring? And you can see how they can see that in the digital system in the screen shot included on the slide. If you have questions related to Acadience Reading, you can ask Teresa or myself, Jared, for Acadience Math. Next. All right.
There was a question in the chat. Is there a possibility in the future for the vendor closing the benchmark window so they can't accidentally be tested outside the window? That is definitely something we are talking to Acadience about because we don't like that that's possible either. So they have not agreed to that at this point, but we are in discussions about that. So they would require them to make some changes within their own system in order to be able to accommodate that. So progress monitoring on rate. I have been working on sending emails out about progress monitoring. And so you will be receiving, some of you have already received that. I'm working through the list. But I just wanted to give some information about that. So if a student is receiving on-grade progress monitoring, the benchmark counts as a progress monitoring pro for the week. So no progress monitoring needs to be given. It counts within that cycle of whatever that frequency is. However, if they're receiving off-grade progress monitoring, in order to stay on rate, they still have to receive that off-grade progress monitoring in addition to the benchmark. Otherwise, it will then show them as being off rate. The system does give about a 1-week grace period before it removes student data from all of those progress monitoring reports, but they could show as not on rate over your holiday break. So depending on how long your break is, whether the student receives progress monitoring right before you leave and right when they come back, they could show as gray again in your progress monitoring reports until they have 3 data points. So again, that is also something we're working with Acadience on to be able to add some additional information to show that a student has received a progress monitoring before the 3 data points that Acadience requires to provide a prediction towards the student's final, their progress towards their goal. Okay, so it defaults to the benchmark. Thank you, Ben, because I was told it defaults to whatever the teacher used last time. And that if they selected progress monitoring, the next time they log in, it will stay at progress monitoring. And then instead they would have to select benchmark if they're administering a benchmark. So it seems like you're saying that it actually, during the benchmark window for your LEA, defaults to benchmark automatically, and they actually have to toggle to progress monitoring. That is the opposite of what I was told. So, okay, thank you. I would really appreciate, I don't have access to assess because I have not been assigned to any students as assessed. So I can't see exactly what that looks like on your end. I would really appreciate some feedback with that, because if that's really what's happening, then I can definitely talk to ALO, because I was told different. Okay. Michelle's saying, yes, we have to toggle every time as well. I will be reaching out to ALO because that was not the information that I was told. And I can definitely see that being an added difficulty, that it's defaulting to that benchmark. Okay. Well, looks like I'll be having a conversation with ALO, because that's not what I was told. Because that was actually something I specifically asked, because I was concerned about that being an issue. So thank you. This is why we have these meetings, so we can get some feedback on things that we can't see, or, you know, may be different than what we understood. Because, so thank you. I appreciate the feedback. Next slide. The Progress monitoring student materials, I've had a couple of questions about this. So the ALO system does select those progress monitoring materials for the student, and the next selection will carry over to the next school year. So for example, a kindergarten student uses nonsense word fluency forms 1 through 8 in kindergarten. In first grade, the student's progress monitoring forms will start at form 9. So the system just goes, okay, you've already seen 1 through 8. We're going to start in form 9 and then move forward from there in first grade. And then if they do use all the progress monitoring probes, the system will start them over again at 1. So if you're doing it every single week and a student gets through all of them, it will start over again at 1. And next slide.
What is a question?
Yeah. Could you provide a little more information, Jason? Can you send me an email just in giving, if you could provide an example with an SSID number, then we can really look into why that's happening. And so I will say, as students move in or out of an LEA, those data exports can change because the student's no longer associated to you, and that may be why your data is changing based on the day you pull the export is based on student enrollment for your LEA at that time. But if you have some specifics like, no, this student was still enrolled with us and they're disappearing, I would love that information. So, and yes, I 100%, Lynette, agree with you. It's something that we're discussing. ALO is relatively new as far as like companies go and using online, and they are adding a lot of features. So every time we meet with them, they're like, well, this is what we're working on. And we have created a list of features that we would like added to their system too at the state level. So Jared and I worked actually just in the last couple of weeks and ranked like all of the suggestions that you guys have gotten and said, hey, these are the things that we've received the most feedback from, that we really like need these things. And then there were things like, this would be a nice feature, but you know, like it can wait. So I do think a pause button for that progress monitoring over winter break would be lovely, although we are working with them to improve their progress monitoring reports to provide additional information so that you don't have to wait until there's 3 prompts before they appear on any report. So that you can see immediately like, oh, a student has received progress monitoring. We may not have the prediction yet, but at least we know they're being progress monitored. And so it is something we are working with them on. And Melissa, I was told from ALO that the system does start them over. So I guess if you get to the point where it should start the student over and they don't, please let me know immediately, because that was a specific question I asked. Oh, thank you, Jason. And then, yes, the merged SSIDs, that is something we are also in conversations about, how we can better facilitate and help support you with that on our end, because those merged SSID numbers do result in a student being removed from ALO, and then they have to actually be added back into the system, and we have to know that they needed to be back added into the system. Tamara, yes, all historical data that we have received files for has been uploaded into ALO. You can look at previous years' data through the drop-down little green arrow on the student list, and you can see historical benchmark. And if you're looking at it for students, when you go into the individual student profile and you're looking at their assessment score data, on the right side, there will be like a little drop-down where you can select different years. It does not show you data like M-Class did, where you can see like the students kindergarten through whatever many grades all on one page. ALO has it on separate pages, but that is available. And if you don't have that, see if the files were downloaded and somebody has them in your LEA, and then you can share them with Emily Ng through Move It, and we can get them into the ALO system. And Michelle, I have an update on that. And yes, so Erin, she says it's in the 3 dots on the right-hand side. Yeah, when you can go over there and look and just drop down and select the different years. And if you think you sent in, Tamara, can you just send me an email? I will go ahead and look at your LEA's information, and it's possible that it just got missed. We were receiving a ton of files. Emily was receiving a ton of files that she was then transferring on, and the person who was doing that went on maternity leave, and there's a potential that your files got lost in her email as she went on maternity leave and didn't get transferred to the new person to get it uploaded into the system. So please send me an email and I can look into that for you. And okay, next slide. So I did want to just put out a celebration and a thank you. The progress monitoring at rate has increased incredibly. So if you look at like our spring data from just, a little short time ago to fall, and look at the number of schools. This is not by LEA. This is actually by school. 61% of people are now above 90% with their progress monitoring fidelity being at rate for their below and well below benchmark students. And those schools that are below 50% dropped to 7.4%. So that is definitely a reason to celebrate. And then if you look at like just where we started, like in fall 22-23, when the bill first came out and the progress monitoring was required, to 2 years later, that is just a phenomenal increase. And that's really to the efforts of you and your teachers and your school administrators in really prioritizing and ensuring that we're collecting data that can then inform our instruction. So the next steps really is to utilize that data to make sure that we are informing our instruction and our interventions and really catching those students when they need it. But I wanted to take a minute to celebrate because I was super excited when I pulled the data to see such a huge increase from where it was before. And especially because the ALO really does not provide as great admin reports for monitoring that progress monitoring. So I really do applaud your efforts. Next slide. And then just a little bit of information about how you can see highly skilled learners. If a student scores meets the designation of a highly skilled learner, but they get below typical growth, an asterisk will appear next to their pathway after they have received their middle of year testing. And it will default that they made typical progress. So if a student is a highly skilled learner, but they make typical or better progress, the system does not designate that in any way. It does not provide that little asterisk. But if their progress was below typical progress, it's saying, hey, we recognize the student as being a highly skilled learner, and we recognize that that is impacting their growth. And so the little asterisk comes next to their name. So if you do have highly skilled learners that you're like, I feel like this student meets the criteria, but there's no asterisk, that's because they made typical or better growth. And so the system didn't need to change their growth to reflect the fact that they're a highly skilled learner and recognizing that impact upon growth. Brian, there is not a way to pull the data that I pulled. I actually had ALO pull the data for me. It took them like 3 weeks to pull the data for me. So I wish that I could say that that was something that you could do. And like I said, I am working with ALO to improve their progress monitoring reports and data to make sure that we're better able to inform our instruction for students. Yes, it will default to typical in the exported data file as well for students who made below typical growth but met that highly skilled learner criteria and therefore is given that typical growth designation. Next slide. And then student Acadian's data is anticipated to transfer with students starting January 10th. So there was a question earlier about that. So hooray, I know that that has been a major issue. I was told unless something happens in this middle of the year time that their IT team has to drop working on the data transfer, that it will come out in their release on January 9th. And so then students should start transferring with their data on January 10th. So I'm crossing my fingers, nothing bad happens during this benchmark period that causes their IT team to stop working on this and move into something else. So 2 celebrations for Acadians today. Next slide. That's
Okay,
it.
so I have one more, I have one thing I
go
want to
ahead.
jump in. So
Oh, yes.
try not to make this more confusing because we don't have a slide on this. We have had a lot of questions come about and some confusion in, and help me out, Teresa, if I miss
Okay.
or here. In the ALO system, there's an accommodation that you can indicate for a student and it's directions translated.
Nope, directions read in home language.
Directions read in home language. We are working with Acadians to clarify and maybe see what we can do, how Acadians is using directions in home language is different than how we classify directions in home language. So we are working with Acadians. So if you have students where your test administrators are providing directions in their home language, as in like, welcome, we're going to take a test today, we're going to test reading, but if you're not translating the scripted directions within the assessment, which is not allowed, please don't mark that. Does that make sense? So Acadians is taking the directions in home language in their system as meaning you've translated the content of the assessment.
The script.
The script, right? Like the scripted directions. Does that make sense? I've got a couple head nods in here. So online too. So I know. So I know I was debating, Sid and I were debating on whether or not we even say anything to try to not confuse you. So we're going to try to pull that data. We're working with them on that language and that confusion piece. So if teachers are not translating the content, the scripted content of the items, don't mark that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Which is not allowed. You cannot translate the scripted directions.
If you translate the scripted directions, you've modified the assessment and we consider that an invalidated score. Okay, so we are working on that and we'll probably be in a space that we're going to just have to add some additional language to some of our guidance stuff. If you indicate that, you shouldn't change anything with score reporting, any of those things. So if you find something different, please email Teresa and I. Yes, ask away.
So if they've already done it in the past, is it from moving forward or?
Already done, more like
Indicated it.
marked it, just leave it. It's fine.
Yeah, you can't change it at this point. We're actually going to pull a report because we're curious to see how many people are marking that. And then we want to reach out just to verify that the marking is because you're thinking, I'm telling the student in their like home language at the beginning, and not that people are actually translating the assessment.
Yeah.
We just want to validate that for ourselves.
Okay. All right, email me if you need to. So just remember, don't do anything with that unless they've actually accidentally translated the content. Okay, thanks. Hopefully we didn't make it more confusing.
It's really should never be used because it's not allowed.
Yep. Okay.
And we're about halfway through our slides and have on the downhill slope. So we're going to take a quick break. Let's do 10 minutes. So we'll come back at 10:07.
There we go. All right, really quickly, we are going to just review Apple reporting now that Apple testing is done, which by the way was probably the smoothest that we have had. So thank you so much for all of your efforts there with that. Even our help desk tickets with Apple were depleted by like 25%. So we will take that as a win. For reporting, just remember there's 3 types of reports. There's the national report, the school report, and the teacher report. The national report will allow you to see national averages as compared to schools. So when you're looking at that report, the little orange dot, which is almost not even detectable if you're looking at the slides, but that little tiny orange dot is where your national average is, and then you can see on that bar graph how you compare. When it comes to school reporting, it's going to allow you to see the performance of individual classes within a school. And then your teacher reporting has some filtering where you can sort by cactus, you can filter by language and grade level, those types of things just to get through. If you have further questions on what you see in reporting, you can contact me or Carl Bowman as well, who is our dual language immersion specialist, who works more closely with the Apple reports and what you can do with those after. Next thing to be aware of with UTIPS, just remember that as semesters and trimester courses roll, that UTIPS becomes unavailable as it re-rosters students to their appropriate courses and teachers. So generally speaking, we advise that you not use UTIPS the first 2 or 3 days after a semester or trimester change. And at the same time, if you're not seeing students you expect to see, please let me know, because I can work with Doug, our developer with UTIPS, and usually get that problem fixed for you within 24 to 48 hours. And if you try to add that student yourself, you'll notice that the student disappears the next day. So you keep adding them and they keep disappearing, and I know that it's adding to your frustration levels. So just don't do that. Contact me and I will work with Doug and we will get that kid in there so that they don't have to disappear anymore every time UTREX syncs with UTIPS. Okay. For RISE, just a reminder for those of you who are on the Chrome OS, I went over this in October, but because this is going to roll for January, I wanted to bring it just to the top of your brain one more time if it's something that hasn't been addressed yet. But remember that Google will release a new version of Chrome, and we need you, if you are using Chromebooks, to choose one of the 2 options where you'll either update to the long-term support or you're going to allow the native client to access. You've got to access that through the Google console, okay? And I provided a lot more detailed guidance again in that October AD meeting, and you can go back and rewatch it if you need a little bit more guidance. You can also reach out to the RISE help desk if your IT specialists need a little more guidance with that as well. But I just wanted this back up on your radar, because if you are using Chromebooks, this is going to affect you in 2 weeks, okay? If you haven't taken care of it already. Also, for our spring administration training, we have that scheduled now for Thursday, February 13th. It is scheduled from noon to 3. You can register in Midas right now. The course is up there. Okay, it will be recorded. It's going to be posted on the assessment YouTube channel. Okay, it is also going to include remote administration guidance. So if you are one of our LEAs who is going to participate in remote administration for RISE testing, please attend or plan to watch the recording because it will be posted. Cindy, why is there a change to scale scores in the interims to include decimal points? It's a great question I don't know the answer to. Send me an email and we'll see what's going on there. With the interim window, remember that the fall window ends this Friday, okay? So any interim assessments that have been started need to be completed by Friday, all right, for them to be scored. The winter interim, or the winterim, as I like to lovingly call it, window, will open on January 2nd and then close again February 28th. As a friendly reminder for you, this is our Megan's favorite, the firm but friendly reminder, set your testing window so that assessments are not administered in error. It's happened already a few times. You can go in as LEA assessment directors and do the appeals request to go through. It's just kind of tedious and we don't love to do that, but it does happen. But also remember that when a teacher calls you and says that they somehow administered a summative test, don't be afraid to ask them how, because they have to type summative. Like, are you sure you want to administer a summative test? And they click yes. And then it says, are you sure? Please type summative in the box. So if they're administering summative tests, remind them that the autopilot has got to go off because they have told the system multiple times that that's what they want to do. Okay, we are hopeful that that minimizes the misadministrations, and it definitely took them down. But we're seeing a little bit of an uptick. So don't be afraid to remind them that that's what's going to happen. For your mid-year summative window, so any students who have courses that end in the middle of the year, that window has been open since the beginning of November and will remain open once you are back from your holiday break through February 28th. Again, as a reminder, during this time, benchmarks are still available, okay? But any summative test started before February 28th needs to be completed by the end of the day on February 28th, so make sure that that's submitted. Also make sure that the test is submitted and finished before your course end date goes into effect, because every once in a while we have kiddos in the middle of their interim test, and even though the window's still open, their course has ended, and so they move on, and then all of a sudden you are frustrated because they're no longer in the system, because they're no longer enrolled in the course that's rostering them for that test. So make sure that they finish it before the course end date finishes. Can paras help administer RISE benchmarks? Carrie, they absolutely can, as long as they've gone through your testing ethics training. For Utah Aspire Plus, this is your reminder that there will be 2 trainings. The January 22nd one is for your technology coordinators, which for some of you is the very same person, which is great if you're wearing multiple hats. And then there's also the test administration training, which will be the following week, January 29th. I did update the time on this one to reflect a 3-hour window rather than a 2-hour window, just to give us enough time, because with last year's training, if you recall, reporting had not been configured in Adam yet. So that wasn't part of our initial administration training, and neither was remote administration. And I'd like to be able to get all of those taken care of in one sitting rather than pulling you back. Again, this is also going to be recorded, but I don't want you to get confused in that these are the same MIDAS course number, but 2 separate sections. So if you are registering for one or the other or both, make sure that you get enrolled for the ones that are appropriate for your role, and then sharing out the ones that you would like other people in your LEA to attend. For Adam, you can begin verifying accounts starting January 6th. So that means that you can go in and you can add new school administrators, remove school administrators who are no longer associated with your LEA. But remember, when it comes to Adam, that teacher accounts and student accounts are loaded through Utrex, so you don't touch those, okay? You also can't make edits to them, all right? If your tech coordinator does not have a MIDAS account,
They have to reach out to the
they would,
Microsoft
that's
help
right.
desk.
reach out to the Midas Help Desk and they will help get them enrolled. And with that, we can go on to ACT unless you have questions, and you can drop them in the chat or ask them.
Quick question. I know, and I might have missed it if it was an AD memo about having samples, writing samples for RISE.
Writing samples for
The-
RISE.
What was it called?
The rubrics?
Rubrics and any kind of like little samples or something, or sometimes samples.
Oh,
That you're talking about that should be released in December.
Like project. We're working on getting those released.
It's still not going to be released yet.
The writing rubrics should be
Released like.
released this week.
Okay. Because I thought, I'm remembering December.
Yes.
Okay, so, okay.
Putting all the pretty bows on them.
Yeah, I just actually got an email today with, hey, here's all the final edits, because we've done a bunch of edits and changes, right, as we've kind of worked with them, and especially as we did our
Educator review.
review with our educators. And so we should, if everything looks good here, then they should be released. And then we are doing that training in January around the writing, and we'll be going over the rubrics with teachers and the differences with the prompt language, and then hopefully releasing also just some example student essays with the new rubrics
That's what they all want, right?
just for 5th and 8th grade. So we don't have them for everybody, but we know our 5th and 8th grade teachers really want
Yes, they do.
that information.
Yes, they do.
So,
Maybe when we send out the WIDA updates, we can do it all together so you're not getting multiple emails.
Thank you.
Okay,
So-
good morning, everyone. This is Jessica here. I just wanted to do a reminder about our upcoming deadline for accommodations for the ACT. You can go to the next slide. So if you have not prioritized submitting your initial request for ACT accommodations in the TAA, that's the system you use to submit accommodations for the ACT, that deadline is fast approaching when you return for winter break. So please ensure you have calendared some time to get this done well before that deadline. In case you encounter any errors or need any technical assistance, you're cushioning yourself that time, because there is not a grace period with ACT, especially I know we have a lot of new assessment directors. ACT has very, very strict requirements on these initial deadlines. If you miss it, they absolutely will not bend. And that is not a conversation you want to have with parents, because typically our recommendation is if you fail to submit the accommodation on behalf of the student, typically our recommendation is the school needs to then pay for that student to go take a national test on a Saturday. And that's not a fun conversation to have with parents. So just laying that all out there so you take this as a high priority item if you haven't done this task yet. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then as a reminder, you do need to ensure that you have a consent to release information, and that is linked here. You don't need to necessarily get a parent signature as we're getting close to this deadline. You can just make a phone call to parents and say, hey, we're requesting accommodations for your child. Are you comfortable with us sending your student's IEP to ACT so we can request those accommodations? And just make a note on this consent to release information form. You know, whoever it is, John Smith spoke to parent on whatever date and gave approval, and then that is good enough. And just keep those forms on file in a secure location at your LEA. You don't have to turn that form into ACT. And then also, if you're new, keep in mind when you are requesting accommodations for the ACT, you need to be thinking about kids who have IEP plans, 504 plans, English learners, because ACT does have English learner supports. And then also some students who have medical needs, and typically the one that comes up is students who are diabetic and they might not have a 504 plan or anything on file, but maybe the nurse is aware of it and they have, a health service plan. So you need to check with your school nurses, because if that student uses a phone, that's more common now in 2024, to monitor their diabetes, they're going to need an ACT approval for that. So that's the scope of accommodations that you're looking at. Make certain that you are communicating with all relevant personnel in your LEA so that you have taken account for all of these student needs. Okay, next slide.
There is a question online.
Okay, can you read it to me, because I can't see it right now?
Yes, of course. Do we know who to contact for access to the accommodations? I have requested access 3 times now and still don't have them. This is for ACT.
I don't understand that. What do you mean you don't have access? You don't have a TAA account? If you need a TAA account, there is on our USBE State of Utah ACT page, there is an entire guidance document on that information, if that is what the question was for.
Okay, I have the account, but there is nothing in there.
Okay, so this might be a Maureen question, maybe. The data not connecting.
It just says request more access.
Okay, you might.
If you want to send, I think if you want to send me an email, I can get in touch with our people from ACT and see what we can do about it. I will try. Scott.
Someone put.
So Rachel, several times.
And so on the last slide is our ACT accommodation, will be our ACT accommodations contact information. I do not have any type of access to those accounts, so that will be something you'll have to reach out to ACT to assist you with, and then Maureen can also help with that too.
I'm happy to contact them also on your behalf and see if we can get things sorted.
So send Maureen Rushing an email.
Yes.
And maybe include Jessica, just so that we're all in support of one another.
Okay, next slide.
Thank you, Tracy.
You have to click on that. When you click on that, you have to click on the ACT tab. But
Okay, so another reminder, especially this is really for our new assessment directors. ACT, when you submit any student plan, they're looking for alignment. So whoever is making these submissions, you need to do a check and ensure that whatever you're requesting for the student to have for an ACT test accommodation, that it's actually documented somewhere on that student's plan, because that is what ACT is looking for. If they don't see that the student has extended time on their IEP, they're going to deny that request. So that's a simple checks and balances that you can do at your LEA level for whoever's making those requests to minimize any denials. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as we are approaching this date, you need to, once you have made your initial request, you need to be monitoring your TAA account, because you're going to receive what's called a decision notification about your request. You want to make certain that you follow up if anything was denied. So don't just assume that you put in those requests and then you don't access your TAA account. You need to be checking that, because you're going to need to make certain that you've received an approval with the decision notification. If a student did not get approved for the accommodation, sometimes that's not necessarily something you just want to be like, okay, well, so sad, too bad, we're moving on. You might need to do some advocacy or investigate why did that student not get approved, because you might need to take action. Maybe it was because something was not documented, Or sometimes ACT makes mistakes and they deny something because they overlooked that it was actually in fact on a student's IEP. So there's going to be another window that opens up, and that's the request for reconsiderations window. And that is like 2 weeks, it's on the ACT schedule events like 2 weeks after the initial deadline. So you have a very short turnaround to work with ACT to resubmit. And if you really feel that a student should have been approved for an accommodation and you're not really in agreement with ACT's decision, you can also email me. There are some instances where things are not approved and really should have been, and I am more than happy to advocate on ACT. And when I communicate with them and their ACT accessibility specialist, they are on top of it, and we can usually get those approved if there have been some errors or oversights. So what I'm just saying is like, we have to advocate for our students, and, you know, these are just humans working at ACT. Sometimes there's mistakes. If there's a denial, look into it. Don't just let that sit if it was a legitimate request. We need to advocate for our students. Okay, next slide. Okay, and here is that contact information to the ACT. This is specifically to reach out to their accommodations team. This is the best number and extension to contact them versus their main line. And then you're always free to reach out to me as well if you're not getting the response that you want. I'm always happy. I meet with ACT every week to advocate for our students in Utah. And that's all.
All right.
Let me know if there's any questions in the chat. I can't see it.
Okay, I think you're good. You can go ahead and move on to the next slide. For the self-reported indicators for school accountability, we are extending the window. It was supposed to be submitted by December 20th, which is tomorrow, but because there have been some LEAs that have contacted us about needing support getting artifacts uploaded onto Data Gateway, that is going to be extended through December 31st. I know that that's during a lot of your break, so please contact me if you need help submitting that self-reported or the self-reported indicators online. There is an issue with my work phone number, so email is best for me while we're still getting that phone number figured out. So that's all I got for you.
That is it. So thank you so much for joining us. Glad for the celebrations and also for raising some of the questions, and we will look into those things, make sure we're getting back with you, but appreciate the partnership that we have with all of you, and wish everyone a happy holidays. So thank you.